All right. Well, excuse me. This is Scott from boberdoo.com. I think we'll get started. We'll cover a couple housekeeping items here before we get going, and then as the rest of the people are joining on, I'm sure they can catch up quickly. So I want to thank everyone for our Ping Post webinar today. Brett, the resident expert here at Boberdoo, is going to be covering the majority of it, and I'll chime in when it's appropriate. So we have a decent number of people on this webinar today. If you have questions as we go through, if you would simply type them in that little bubble for the instant messaging in the Join Me app, and we will copy all those down and then cover them at the conclusion of the call. So as you think of them, please feel free to go ahead and instant message those across. So I'm going to get ready to hand it over to Brett. We're going to, as you can see here, we're going to be covering dynamic pricing with Ping Post, both buying from and selling to. And we'll cover some of the different details and options in the actual system. We have some examples set up. So interestingly enough, there was a pretty good mix of the different verticals. So we were pretty much spread out across, pretty evenly across the home improvement, insurance, auto finance verticals. So we just created a fairly generic insurance lead type to serve as the example for this. But again, that process is going to be applicable regardless of your lead type. This time I'm going to go ahead and hand this off to Brett, and he is going to take it away.
Sorry about that. My headset was giving a little bit of trouble. Hopefully everyone can hear me a little bit better now. All the end volume?
Yeah.
All right. Yep, that was the headset. So as I was saying, basically on the Ping Post, you know, your fields that are submitted on the Ping versus what's required on the Post. So depending on how you want to route your leads, upon the filters, whether it be age, whether it be zip code, any other type of field depending on your specific vertical, that's determined by you, and then we can create the system to handle that. So first and foremost, let's look at the lead type specs for this particular lead type we're going to be diving into. So where you can see the Ping Post lead type specs that you need to give to your vendor, this can be found by clicking Settings and then going to your API specs.
You know what?
And then there's a post lead.
Jim?
So when you
this is like an IT. Listen.
Oh.
So now when you click on Ping Post, all the lead types that in your store and the lead type that you're here. All right, so the Ping Post specs page here, once you click on the lead type of the specs you're trying to look for, it's going to display here very similar to your regular normal posting specs. It's going to show what the fields are, which ones are required on the Ping versus which ones are required on the Post, and of course it's going to give, you know, the allowed values and some examples. So looking at this lead type, like we said, we made it a pretty generic insurance one. You can see what's required on the Ping. They're going to have to submit through the state and the zip, so that way we can route the leads and get your bids based on your buyers. Page as well. Give this page to your vendor, or there is a quick link, just like there is for your regular postings, that you can give out, and then you can just simply copy and paste this link and give to them. so that way they have access to the posting specs. So you'll see the first couple fields here that they need. There's a key, and you can see here it says provided by site admin, so that's your end. And then just like your regular normal lead, SRC is also required to be sent. So three things, to recap, three things you need to give to your vendor in order for them to sell you ping post leads. You need to grab the posting specs to give to them. You're going to grab their unique key, and you're going to grab their unique SRC. And how you get those two values, I'll show you right now. So back into the system. Your first one, a vendor account. And when you create a vendor, what that does is it gives them access so that they can log in on their side. They can see what leads they've submitted. They can run reports on those leads. So once you create that vendor account, and we just created this one here called Dynamic Vendor Company. So after you would have filled all this information out and click Submit, and then all you need to do is click on them. And the very top thing here is the API key. So you would copy and paste this entire value, and then you would send that to your vendor along with the posting specs, of course, and then the SRC value that we're going to grab right now. So what this API key is really is almost like a username password, so that way we always know who is actually sending these leads through. So it's just more of like a unique identifier. So then, of course, we also have the SRC, or the source. Now this is your main tracking variable in the system, so you're able to easily identify which leads came from who. So once you go to settings, source vendor settings, you're going to click add new source. And that's going to give you a pop-up here where you'll be able to fill in all this information. The SRC is whatever value you type. So this is what you're going to give to them along with the API key, along with the posting specs. So to save time, we already created the SRC name. We attached that vendor that we just looked at previously. So now that we have those three items, you would be able to then send them off to your vendor, and that would be everything that they need on their end to know how to send leads to you on the ping and on the post. So just to walk through a couple of things here on the SRC side, since this particular SRC is set up as dynamic, that means that they're going to send a lead in, we're going to ping that lead out to your buyers, and then based on what your buyers return back, we're going to dynamically offer back a cost to this vendor company. So that way, each lead that they send could, in theory, have a different cost associated with each of them, and that's what we mean by dynamic. So to set that up, the only thing you really need to do is you're going to set this particular field to either yes or yes but sold non-exclusively. So return best price. That literally means you're going to return the best price offer back to the vendor for each lead. So that's how it's determined that this buyer in particular is dynamic. And no, for each SRC you can set the lead cost. That would be only if they're static. Since they are dynamic, you would just leave this simply at 0. Set this to yes, and that way each lead cost can be a different number. So now, Scott, if I want to hand this off to you for the buyer side of things. So now that we looked at how you're going to set up your vendor to get the posting specs so they can sell leads into you, let's go ahead and look at the buyer side. Scott, let me know if you just got that presenter role.
I I did. One second. So Brett, while this is it's getting set up here, would you talk a little bit about yes versus yes but sold non-exclusively in that source setting?
Yes, definitely. So if they're going to be dynamic pricing, it's going to have to be either yes or yes but sold non-exclusively. If it's set to yes, what this means is that you're essentially offering that best price offer from your buyer, minus the margin that you can take out, which we'll touch upon in a little bit. You're going to take that price offer minus your margin and offer that back to the vendor. So kind of the whole flow of how this works is ping comes in from your vendor, we send it out to all your buyers, and then we gather their price offers as they come back in, and the margin is then taken out, and then we offer back that price minus the margin back to that vendor. So let's say the ping comes through, you have a buyer that's set up for $15 minus a $2 margin. You would reply back on the ping to the vendor, matched with a price offer of $13, that 15 minus the 2. If that vendor accepts that price offer, the vendor accepts that $13 price offer, then they can then post that lead through, and we will attempt to then post that lead to whoever that highest bidder was. On the post, as you know, sometimes the post can get rejected from that buyer. Let's say it's, the buyer rejects it for being a duplicate or any other type of reason. If it's set to yes, that means we're going to simply then reply back unmatched then on the post, because that highest bidder rejected that lead. We return back then unmatched. The difference between that and then yes but sold non-exclusively is we will then offer on the post, if that first highest bidder rejects it, we will then look at any other buyer who also may have wanted to accept that lead, and as long as their price offer is greater than the cost that you return back, so in this case $13, we would then attempt that post as a secondary post after the first one failed. So to recap, yes basically means you're taking that best offer. If that buyer gets it, great. If they don't, no one else is going to be able to get it. You're just going to return back unmatched to the vendor. Compared to yes but sold non-exclusively, we'll attempt to any other buyers who also have accepted that lead on the ping, as long as their price offer is greater than the cost that you return back. And that just to ensure that you don't lose money, obviously, by selling the lead for less than what you bought it for.
Thank you. So now we're going to go ahead and take a look at the partners, the lead buyers in the system, and the various ways that we can set up those buyers to receive leads in a ping post basis. So first we're going to cover Acme Insurance Agent, and this partner has been set up for static pricing. So given a set of parameters, this lead buyer is willing to pay a certain price per lead. So we're going to go into their filter sets, and we'll see right off the bat we have two filter sets. The first is titled Static Illinois at $10, and the second is Static Wisconsin at $15. So if we go into one of these filter sets, we're going to see the various options that you can set up for this buyer. So in this case, this buyer is willing to pay $10 for a lead coming from Illinois. So that would be the lead price. We're going to ignore this fake ping post setup for now. That's always something that can be covered individually with Brett after a call. The profit margin type then can either be set as fixed or variable. So because they're on a static price, it makes the most sense to use a fixed profit margin here, and we see that as 2. So when a ping comes in and matches this specific filter set, the system will calculate the bid as the $10 price minus the $2 profit margin, leaving $8 as the bid to be returned back to the lead seller. So then if we scroll on down, you'll see the other options that are available for any lead type, regardless of if it's ping post or regular real-time delivery. And then just in this simple example, in this state, we see that they're set up to take all Illinois leads. And then, of course, you have your age and your insurance type, which you could then use to further drill down and restrict the leads to which this filter set is eligible. And then if we take a look at the Wisconsin one, it is a very similar setup. With the exception of the geography, Wisconsin, and then the lead price of being $15 instead of $10 as it was in Illinois. But the setup is the same. Difference is we're going to take a slightly larger profit margin of $3. So in this case, we would end up returning a bid back of $12 to the lead seller. And then we see the geographic parameters of it being restricted to Wisconsin only. So that's the basics for setting up a static lead buyer in the system, and now we can take a look at the difference between that and a wholesaler or a lead buyer that has the ability to dynamically reply to a given ping with a price. So the setup for that partner is essentially the same, the only difference being the filter set. So in here, rather than having specific filter sets for geographic or price, we have one filter set set up for dynamic. And so in here, the first thing you'll notice is that 0 is the price. And that is so if there was a problem with the ping out to this buyer, you would not be capturing any hard cost or hard price back from them, and we would take a 0 bid from them. And then we're going to jump to the profit margin type. And as opposed to fixed as it was with the static buyer, we are using a variable profit margin matrix. And so this gives you the ability to take out a different profit margin percentage based off of the specific bid that's returned back from this lead buyer. So you can see for up to $10, we're going to take a 30% profit margin, and then from 10:01 to 20, we're going to take a 40, and then anything above $20 is going to be a default 50% profit margin. So the next thing to take a look at is the delivery setup. So in order for this buyer to return back a bid to a ping, they must have a custom delivery setup. And so we have one set up in here. Basically, you can either submit your buyer's custom deliveries to boberdoo. We do a lot of those, something we're very efficient at. But there is a wizard in the settings tab that allows you to build your own if you have that technical knowledge and desire. And so the rest of the filter set is the exact same. The difference being is that because we are pinging them and it's going to be based off of their specific buyers, we're going to leave these filter sets wide open. And so this is going to allow us to ping every lead that we get in to this buyer and capture their dynamic bid.
So just to jump in there, the dynamic is really great because it allows you to leave these filter sets wide open. So rather than you determining the lead price or them determining the lead price based on specific criteria, and like in the last account, we had to create a different filter for Illinois and Wisconsin. You'd have to follow suit for every other different, set of criteria that's going to have a specific price. By having someone that's dynamic, you can leave it wide open. You just send them everything, and then ping post, pinging them. You're seeing if they actually want that lead, and if they do, they say yes, and here's how much I want for it. That's the great thing about ping post. It makes it kind of easier on everyone, and then also at the same time allowing the prices of your leads to really be pinpointed to a specific pricing model, since each unique lead is treated individually, and then that price is then returned based on that lead information. So now that we looked at both the agent side of having an individual bid and then also this dynamic buyer as well, we can go to the lead page to see kind of how this whole process plays out and how you can see what happened with each lead by looking at the lead log. So of course on the leads page you can see every single lead that comes into your system, you know, who it sold to, how much it sold for, the SRC it came from. By default, the leads page will never show just the pings. So let's say a ping comes through and, you know, none of your buyers accepted that ping, or maybe they sent a ping that's from Alaska and you don't have any buyers set up to take that lead information. In that situation, we would reply back unmatched on the ping response, and that would mean that, you know, obviously no one no one accepted that lead. But by default, those pings will not show up on the leads page. But if you wanted to see those, you could simply click the filter icon, and then at the very top, there's a filter option here to choose to view posts only, pings only, or you can view both pings and post. So if a common example is, hey, my vendor's sending me a bunch of pings and they're not selling to my buyers, what's happening? You could come to the leads page, filter by pings only, filter by that SRC, so that way it only shows their pings, and then you can click on the lead, show lead log here, and that will display, you know, what happened with that lead. Maybe your buyer's rejecting it for some reason, maybe there's no buyers accepting that geographic location or filter set criteria. Whatever the reason may be, the lead log will always help you really diagnose exactly what happened with it. So in these lead examples here, let's look at the first one, lead ID 7. So this lead came in from the vendor. They pinged it through. And by clicking show lead log, we can see the process of how it went through. So you always go from the bottom up, because the most example is always going to be at the top. So scrolling down to the bottom, we see the ping came in here at 11:40, and it pinged out to this particular account. Since they don't have a ping post delivery, they're just an agent, they have an email delivery, it shows as a fake ping delivery. And all that means is that that buyer is considered for this lead, it matches their criteria, we're going to grab the price from their lead filter set. Next, we're going to look at the ping went and sent out to the wholesale delivery. This is a dynamic one, so it was sent via that insurance, you know, custom delivery, that's ping post. So it pinged out to them, and they replied back that they're going to offer $8 for that lead. So then we look at the calculations minus the margins. So based on the offer minus the margin, one came out to $5.60, one came out to $8. So the best offer is that $8 from this account. If you remember, it was the $10 in their filter set minus the $2 margin that we're taking out. So that was $8, and that's the best offer returned to the vendor. So that means what we did was the vendor sent the ping, we returned back matched with a offer of $8. So at that point, it's up to them. They can either accept that $8 offer and then post the lead in, or if they don't accept that $8 offer, they just wouldn't send the post through. So here, again, just reiterating that the offer was $10 after the margin $8. The offer from this one was $8 after the margin $5.60. So since that insurance agent had the highest bid, the system then attempted to sell that lead to that particular company. So then when you look at here on the leads page, you see that it actually sold for $8. And then you can see the cost you bought it, it sold for $10, and the cost you bought it for $8. So there's just a clean example of how ping came in. We considered all the buyers who were eligible to take that information. We then grabbed their offers, took out the margins, ordered it by whoever was you're going to make the most money on, and then attempted to sell that lead to them on the post. So now let's look at a different example, lead ID 9. We can see here just by glancing at it that it's sold to this account for $25 and it costs you $12.50. So to see more information, again, you just have to click on the Show Lead Log, and so it can give you details on exactly what happened. So the ping came through. We fake pinged it out to this account. We actually pinged it out to this particular buyer's custom delivery. They replied back, yes, they wanted it, and they're going to offer a price of $25 for it. So then we look at the two offers. From this account, $25 after the margin was set to 50%. We offered $12.50 back to the vendor, compared to this particular account offered $15 after margin was only $12. So of course, we then attempted to post to that highest bidder of $25, and they replied dynamically that the lead was matched. So that's why it then shows on the leads page here, it's sold for $25, you bought it for $12.50. So again, it came through. We considered all of the possible matches based on, the state, based on the insurance type, any other filters that you have. We gathered both offers, sorted by whoever the highest bidder was, and then attempted to post that lead to that highest bidder.
All right. So that's the basic process of of ping post. There's obviously a lot of variations off of this base process. So Brett is going to discuss a couple of scenarios or situations that may come about. But while he's doing this, if people with questions would start Skyping those across, we'll be collecting those and then answering them as they come in once the actual webinar is complete. So Brett, could you start off with a little bit about exclusive versus non-exclusive in the ping post?
Definitely. So we touched upon it a little bit before with that return best price offer. We do have a custom function for processing in the system that we can set up, and what that is called is best scenario. And essentially all that means is potential buyers who can possibly take that lead, and what we do is we separate them.
You cut out for a second, Brett. Would you repeat it?
Yep, sorry. So when the lead comes through, we're going to consider all the possible matching.
I'm sorry, Brett's had to call back in. I think he ran into an issue there. He'll be calling in here shortly. So while Brett is calling back in, there was a question on there as far as the timeout in the source settings. So while Brett's dialing back in, we can talk a little bit about that. There were two settings in the update source that is for the timeouts for both the ping and the post. And so those are given to you by your lead sellers, and that is how long they're going to give you to process or respond back to a ping and then respond back to the post. So typically they're different numbers. If they're not given to you, 20-60 seems to work well. 20 on the ping, 60 on the post. But many cases, vendors will require shorter timeouts. So the idea then is that by putting those settings into your update source, that will ensure that you're always going to reply back to the lead seller with your best bid at that given point. So if you have a dynamic buyer in your ping tree that is whose server is down or who's having problems responding with back to the ping, you're going to cut them off at that timeout and respond back with whatever your best bid is at that time. So this is always going to ensure that you get that bid back to that lead seller, even if though the person who has not yet replied might end up with had a better bid. But again, you want to make sure that you're returning some bid back anytime you can. The other question was buying dynamically and selling statically. So that was the first example, which is lead ID, where you bought the lead dynamically from Lead System, and then you sold it to a static buyer, Acme Insurance Agent, who was willing to pay a static price of $10 per lead.
Sorry about that. I'm back on here. Our office internet cut out is what happened. So I just had to call back from my cell phone while this reboots back up.
All right, Brett. So we left off where you were describing a scenario that allows the system to calculate the best bid based off of the non-exclusive buyers, and then work that in conjunction with your exclusive buyers.
All right. The screen should be back up for everyone right now, right?
Yep.
Okay, great. So what that does is the lead comes through, as I was saying, and then it considers all your buyers, and then it basically separates them into different scenarios. And what we mean by scenarios is, let's say you have one buyer that's exclusive, but it's an exclusive buyer and they're offering $20 for an exclusive lead. And then you also have another set of buyers where they're buying at a shared situation. Maybe they're buying, at $12 per lead. So obviously exclusive sells for more, but if you sell it twice at $12, you're going to make $24 compared to $20. And that's what the scenarios does. It's going to take that first exclusive person, put it in one scenario, see how much you can sell the lead exclusively for. Then it's going to also break out the other buyers into another scenario that considers it selling shared. And then we determine whoever's making you the most money at that point, and that's who the lead will attempt to sell to. So in layman's terms, it considers everything, and whoever you're making the most money for, it's going to try to sell it to that. So should we start going through maybe the questions here we've gotten so far?
So we have the few questions that were put across have been answered while you were dialing back in.
The timeout and the buy and sell?
Yep.
Okay, gotcha. So then I guess one more thing to maybe consider, this is very common, usually in home improvement lead types, but we've also seen it briefly in insurance verticals as well. No really other verticals have really touched upon it. Doesn't mean that they can't or that they will in the future. But what those are hashes. And what that is, let me go back into those ping post specs so that you can see exactly what I'm referring to. So once again, to get the posting specs, we go to settings, we go to API specs, and there's ping post lead. Let's go back to the insurance one. So now there's a few fields that the vendors can submit through. And what this does is it tells you as the buyer who the vendor has already sold that lead to. So maybe you have a couple shared buyers that you both have set up as a buyer and seller in your system. You want to make sure that you're not selling a lead to a buyer who has already received it from another person. So the vendor can submit through allowed time sold, which is the number of the number of legs available that they're going to allow you to sell it. So, let's say that there's a maximum of 4 possible legs. The vendor has already sold it to 2 other people. Now they're offering it to you. So they will tell you that there's 2 legs available for that lead. Now they can also send back the return hash type and the return hash value type. And to reiterate, the hash is basically the coded way of telling you who the buyer who received that lead already was. And the hash type is just a way of converting the normal either phone number or email into an encrypted, basically masked version of that. And those are just different types of encryptions, either SHA-1 or MD5. So they can tell you based on who they sold to, based on the person's email address, their phone, their company name. Promotion code would be used more for insurance, and that could be like the individual agent's license number, or the partner group. Partner group being more along the lines for insurance as well. You know, maybe you have 5 different Allstate agents, and you want to make sure that another Allstate agent doesn't get this lead. So they can submit through that information.
So one thing I'll interject there is that you definitely want to communicate with your lead seller and come to an agreement as to what fields are being passed through, because there does not seem to be an industry standard right now, although it is something that we'd like to work towards. So if you are dealing with this issue, please feel free to reach out to Brett or myself with what's been working for you in terms of dealing with the vendors. We'd like to try and standardize that process as much as possible to make this setup easy.
Yeah, that brings up a really good point, because on your leads page or on your partners page where you set up all your buyers, maybe you have Acme Insurance Agent, so maybe they call it just Acme Insurance Company. Obviously that's a different name, so the hashes would be different. So you would have to go through and, of course, talk with your vendor to discuss, A, what you're going to pass through. Either is it going to be the company name, is it going to be the email, is it going to be the phone number, and then you're going to have to agree, make sure that you both have the same email for that company or the same phone number for that company, because that's the only way it will work. So now when we go through here, and then to touch on Mike's question real quick, because it covers this kind of in that same idea, he said, is this information on the default specs? And yes, this is always going to be under your ping post specs, under settings, API specs, ping post lead. Something to remember, though, is that the vendors will have to use the XML version if they're going to be using the hashes. And there's a little note right here. It says, note, to use the matches or the match with partner hashes, you must use the XML post method of this API. Because there's 2 options that you can do. You can either do XML or you can do get post. They're both pretty standard in the industry, so it shouldn't be too complicated. Here's an example of what they could submit for that XML. So they would submit through here matches. This is who they have matched it with already. So the value type that goes back to here. They're either sending the email or the phone, the company. The hash type. So it could be plain if you don't want to actually hash it. That's obviously not recommended. Or you can use the SHA-1 or MD5. And then the actual value that they want to use. So this is what the system will then look at to determine if that hash is found in the system. So what happens is the vendor sends in the ping. They've already matched it with company 123. The system will then look in the system. All right, has company 123 in there? If so, it automatically takes them off the list and does not make them eligible to be able to get that lead. So that's what the matches section is they are telling you who they have already sold the lead to. So that is a way for the
part is, yeah, sorry, I was just going to jump in, is the main benefit there is that if it has been sold to that buyer's filter set bid is not considered in your ping tree. So it's automatically going to remove that bid so that you would not have reconciliations or situations where two parties are delivering this same lead to the buyer at essentially the same time.
So you can either use that, or the opposite way, you can try to force a match, or you can have your vendor try to force a match with one of your buyers. So in this situation, they send match with partner hashes. They want you to try and sell the lead to this company. So they send through this information. The system then looks for that information in the system. If it finds it, it tries to force the sell to that particular company. So with all this information here, there is more description here with actual definitions of what each of those possible fields mean, as well as examples of what the response can look like. So you can see here with response example with the allowed time sold. So they tell you how many legs are available. You can reply back with how many that you're willing to buy. Similarly with the hashes, they send you the lead with the hashes of who they've already sold the lead to. You come in and then sell the lead to two people. You can then also send back to them, all right, yep, I sold that lead. Here are who I also sold the lead to. So that way everyone has a record of who has gotten this lead. So I know that can get a little complicated here just looking at it. It is something that needs to get set up by us with these custom deliveries if you're going to be doing this outbound to a buyer as well. But if you're setting up a vendor, they want to have this ability to do hashes or legs, as some might call it. Short answer is yes, we can definitely do that, and it's listed here in the specs.
All right. Well, I made a Skype last call for questions, but we'll do it verbally as well. So this is we're going to start wrapping up our demonstration, but of course, if there are still questions out there, we'd love to make sure we can answer them for you and for everybody else on this demo. Typically, if you're thinking of the question, somebody else is as well.
So I know it's a lot to take in. It does seem like it's very complicated. Maybe the first time you're hearing all this, maybe you're inexperienced in this and you just wanted some more clarification. So as Scott said, if you think of something in a couple of minutes or in a week, or you just have to contact us and let us know. boberdoo.com/support here has lots of videos. You can create tickets. You can do chat. You can call directly into me. You can fill out the form, or of course you can always email me, Brett@boberdoo.com as well. So whatever is easier, most convenient for you. Anytime you have a question, just make sure you reach out to us. And I see we do have a
couple more here. So the live call routing. So this is something that we've scoped for a current client as previously, and it is something that we have the ability to custom build, which would be a ping ring, if you will, the ability to essentially ping post an inbound call so that you can ping partial information, typically probably a area code to a buyer, and then they could reply if they're able to take the call and then return a price. So that is not available in the standard system and would have to be scoped out. The big thing there is that your buyers would have to have the ability to essentially get that ping and reply back. But that is something that we can explore on a case-by-case basis if you have buyers that have that capability. And then the other question was regarding sub-buyers or sub-partners. So since they have, if they are set up with their own filter sets, or if they are just part of a delivery option in the parent's filter set, there's no essential difference in how they're calculated in terms of the in terms of the ping post or dynamic bidding, dynamic pricing process.
So yeah, just a definition too of what sub-partners are or sub-buyers are. Here under your main buyers or partners tab, you have your main, what are called parent accounts, which is just your main account. You can create what are called subs, and what those are essentially sales reps within that company. So let's say they have, Acme Insurance Agent has, 5 different reps that they want leads directly sent to. Maybe Rep 1 gets these zip codes, Rep 2 gets these zip codes, Rep 3 gets another set of zip codes. You can create them as sub-buyers or sub-partners in the system, and then create filter sets and attach them to them. So that way, sub-partner 1 can log in, and they would only see leads that they've gotten. Sub-partner 2 would log in and only can see leads that they've received. Whereas when the parent logs in, they can see every single lead, who it was delivered to, which sub, and they can even reassign leads and redeliver them within those subs as well. So just a little background on exactly what that function does and what that.
All right. Well, if there are no more questions, we want to thank you for joining us on today's webinar. Like Brett had said, please feel free to visit support, submit an email, or give us a call if you have additional questions. We will be posting this recording here for future reference and posterity's sake, so I'll be sending out an email with that link as well as soon as it's done processing. So we're also going to try and do these more regularly. So if you have suggestions on other webinars that you would like to see from us, please, again, shoot Brett or myself an email or give us a call and let us know. So thanks again for joining us today, and have a good rest of your Wednesday.